Hi guys, my name is Mukesh Kumar. Today we are going to talk about AWS and AWS integration with Visual Studio. So let's first understand what is AWS. AWS is a cloud computing platform provided by the Amazon. There are multiple services offered by Amazon. We will talk about one by one. There are many more services, but we'll talk about the very famous services like AWS Lambda, API gateways, S3 bucket, EC2 instances, and many more. So let's first understand what is AWS. So to understand AWS and to see all of its services offered by Amazon, just visit awsamazon.com. In order to access any services offered by Amazon, you will have to first create your account. You'll need to provide your credit card detail while creating your account, but the first 1 year is free by some certain limitation of uses. So I have created my account here. So I clicked on the sign in and now you can see the AWS console. This is a single console page where you can access services offered by AWS. So you see the first few options are the recent visited services. So basically we'll be talking about all these services like EC2, DynamoDB, S3, Elastic Bean, and etc. as well. So all the services which is offered by AWS, you can also access all those services from your Visual Studio 17. You can see here the Visual Studio 17 is launched. Uh, the first thing you have to create your IAM account. So let's talk about what is IAM. So to type IAM here, you will be launched to a page where you can set up your authentication and access mechanism. I have configured my access. You can also create your access. So I clicked on user. When you click on the add user, it will ask you through some detail and then a user will be added. You can authorize many users as you want. Once you authorized your user, you will get an access key, secret key, and your password. Use those credentials provided by the AWS console to access your AWS profile from the Visual Studio. So you can see the Visual Studio I've launched. This is Visual Studio 2017. To incorporate the tool of AWS in Visual Studio 17, you have to install an extension of AWS. So go to Tools and click on Extensions and Updates. You can see here I have installed AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio 2017. So once you installed it, you can see AWS Explorer on the left hand side. This will be appear as along with other Explorer here. So you can see all of the services listed here. So first we'll talk about AWS Lambda. So AWS Lambda is nothing, it is just a name of your logic. So the overall goal of the AWS services are to expose APIs. APIs are associated to some logic and those logic are given a name which is called Lambda. To create a Lambda, you first have to add a new project. So when I click new and project, you can see a AWS Lambda example here. So this is AWS Lambda. You can choose any of the option. This is just for sample application, which will create a one single Lambda application, but there are others as well. So I'm not going to choose the test one because we don't want to show the test demo. We just are focusing on console application. So this is the sample application. Let me give some name. My Lambda. This will create a Lambda compatible application here. This will be the same as the console application you usually create in the Visual Studio C#. So the moment you click on the create, it will offer you to create it will show you the blueprint of the application which you want to create. So you may choose empty function or any template you want. So for now, as a demo purpose, we are selecting empty and click on the finish. By this template, you will get a simple function handler which will take an input a string and that will convert a string into the uppercase. So it is going to be your screen very soon. So here you can see a lambda function is created. So if I double click on the function.cs, this is a typical lambda, basic lambda function uh, created by AWS template. So in order to compile this, you have to build the packages, build the solution so that the packages can be restored. So this is the lambda, basic lambda function, which takes an input parameter and convert into to a per. So this is just for a demo purpose. You can write your own custom logic. Now, in order to deploy this lambda to the AWS console, you have to right click here and publish to AWS lambda. While this takes time, let me show you the AWS console. So all the settings, all the services that we can access from the Visual Studio, you can also access from your AWS console web application. So if you type lambda, it will display you lambda. So let's understand where is that lambda and if there is any lambda available or not. So you can see this is the lambda home page where it is not showing any lambda created so far. So here in the Visual Studio, the option appears now. So you will have to give your function name, which is your lambda name. I'm giving it test lambda, and next I'm choosing the late minimum memory so that it will be compatible with the free tier architecture, and selecting the dev role and just say upload. What this upload is doing is it is just creating a lambda function on the AWS console so that it can be used by the APIs. Once this lambda will be uploaded, we can create AWS API gateways and associate this lambda to used by the APIs. You can see here AWS has given us a test mechanism as well. So this is the test input. If you type something in a small letter and invoke it, you will get a capital equivalent of this string. So which means our lambda function is working very well. So to verify, we have created the lambda function. Just refresh this screen and you will see one lambda associated here. So this is the lambda function. In order to see this lambda, click on the manage lambda. You can see this test lambda is created here and all of its detail listed here. So when you click on it, you can do all of those configuration which you can do from the Visual Studio here as well. So for example, configuration and triggers and tags, all of these things. So next thing, we're going to talk about S3 bucket. So what is S3? This is very famous term being used in the AWS environment. AWS S3 is a storage just like Google Drive. So you can store and upload all of your assets which is required in your application. Next is the end-to-end application by AWS. In this AWS, the end-to-end application is called AWS Cloud Formation Stack. So what is this AWS Cloud Formation Stack? Let's create a stack of the application. So just right click on your solution, add new project, and you can see here the AWS serverless application. .NET Core. We don't want to add the test for now. So this is the AWS serverless application, which is the end-to-end uses of the AWS. With this solution will create AWS Lambda API gateways, all of them in the single one go click. I've given it the test stack name. Again, this is asking for the blueprint template. So for now, let me select the blog. So blog API, by selecting the blog, it will create a blog table in the DynamoDB table. I'll talk about the DynamoDB later. And then it will create API gateways and Lambda function. We will come to each point, we'll cover every point one by one. So click on the finish. What this is doing is it is adding a project, AWS compatible project, and this will expose an API. That API we can use to insert, to create a blog, to access a blog, and to list down the blog from the DynamoDB. So you can see here a basic skeleton program has been created. So this is blog.cs, which is the actual structure of the table, and our handler. This is the actual same Lambda function that we created in earlier example, which is my Lambda. And apart from this function handler, there are many codes already added. These are the Lambda functions automatically added by the AWS. As the name suggests, you can easily get the meaning of each and every function. Get blocks is to get the list of the blocks, and get blog is to get the blog by ID. Add blog is for adding a blog, and remove blog is for removing and deleting a blog. As of now, we are not going to detail into each and every function. Rather, we just trying to understand what is the AWS and how we can use AWS in our application. So once you have added this, you have to right click on it and publish to AWS Lambda. So I clicked on the publish AWS and waiting for the same window. So this takes time to connect to the AWS console. So here you go. You can see a publish AWS serverless application window appears. This is asking for you to create the stack name. So this is basically the name of the stack that we will be referring in future. So let's say its name is test stack, and click next. And I click on the publish table, publish. So this will take time. What this is doing is it is basically creating four Lambda functions and the API gateways resources. So while this is deploying it to the AWS, I'll talk about the AWS API gateway. So click on the service and type API gateway. Click on it. API gateway of AWS is give you the facility to design the API and add many of its resources. You can configure resources property from the AWS console itself. So this is basically designing an API. You can set the security configuration in AWS API gateway as well. So you can see here the create in progress is the status. So when it will be ready, it will say the launch status. It will be green, and then your API will be ready to use. The next topic is DynamoDB. DynamoDB is the NoSQL database of AWS. It's just like SQL Server, but it's not a non-relational database. So type DynamoDB. You can see here there's a table option here. So this is test stack block table created by our Visual Studio options, and this is the table. If you click on it and click on the item, you will see here one ID column, because we have not inserted any record in the table. That's why it is not showing any record. So let's check our status. You can see here the create complete. Now your AWS cloud formation stack is ready for use. So let's go and verify the API gateway and the Lambda function created or not. So click on the service again, API gateway. You can see here the test stack. This is the stack name. Click on this. It will show you the API exposed by our AWS. So this has three methods: delete, get, put, and ID. ID has resources get. So when you click on the get and pass your ID, it will give you the particular blog. And when you get the access the get method, it will list down all the blogs. So let's test this API. So to test the API, I have Postman installed in my machine. Let me copy the URL. I copied it and send the request. You can see here our API is now responding. That means our API is now hosted by the AWS and is ready for the use. We are getting the blank record because no blog has been added so far. So let's add a blog and see if we can access the blog added by us. So this is the blog. We don't want any authentication. That's it. So we have created a one blog successfully. So you've got ID of the blog. Let's copy that blog and see if we can access the blog by ID. So I passed an ID of the blog in the request and we are expecting a blog of that ID returns. Here you go. You can see the ID, name and content and the created timestamps. So this is very easy to understand and very easy to create. We can list down all the blogs by sending the get request. So here it is. This is the list of the blog. So we can create many more. So let's say test, send, one more blog created. To access it again, click send. Here you can see two records are written by our API. So this is AWS Cloud Formation Stack. You can see here one test stack is created. If you refresh this, you can see a table created here in DynamoDB. Double click on it. Yes. So this is a true record we have added from the Postman and it is added in the DynamoDB table. The next concept is EC2 instance. EC2 of AWS is a server which is provided at runtime. So uses of EC2 is chargeable, but AWS offer first 750 hours in a day, in a month for free. So if you exceed that, they charge for you as pay you go, pay as you go. So I am again launching EC2. You can see here I don't have any instance for the EC2 now, But let's understand what is EC2 and how we can launch our EC2 from here. So many people ask that how can we host our application into on the AWS cloud. This is very easy to understand. Just right click on it and add a blank application. So I'm adding a web application, ASP.NET web application, and shopping site. Add it. I'm adding a web form just for the demo purpose. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a basic web application and going to host this web application on EC2, that is AWS cloud environment. Here we go. So we have web application created now. I'm going to change its text so that we can know, we can understand, we can identify that this is the application deployed by us. So let me delete all of the sample code generated by Visual Studio. So once we're done with our application, we can host this application on the AWS cloud environment. Just right click on this and publish to AWS Elastic Bean. So AWS Elastic Bean stock is the environment, is the option to deploy your application on AWS EC2 instance. So this is my first time application I'm creating it. So I have checked this create a new application environment. Click on the next. This is your site name and environment. You can choose your environment, dev, test, product, any environment that you want. For example, I want this as a production environment, so I have written it shopping site, and this will be your URL. When the deployment will happen, you will access your application with this URL. Click on the next. Let the default setting as it is. Give your default role. It takes time to load the role, so be patient, please. Yeah, you can see a role here. So this is the power user access role. By default role I have selected here. Clicked on the next. This is all about the IIS setting on the EC2 server instance. I click on the next. Let the default setting as it is and click the deploy. What this deploy option is doing is it is creating a EC2 instance, which is a server, virtual server for me, and it will create a hosting environment. Then it will upload my shopping site application on the EC2 instance and under the IIS. And you can see the progress in your status bar. So let's talk about the AWS Elastic Beanstalk. We can also see all the options from AWS console application. So Elastic Beanstalk, click on this. You can see here, I don't have Elastic Bean at the moment, but I'm in the process of creating the Elastic Beanstalk. So it will create an entry here. And meanwhile, let's check the EC2 instance, whether there is any instance available or not. So here still it is 0, 0, 0. All the instances are 0. And once the process will be completed, you can see it is started now. Once it will be completed, it will create, you will see here one EC2 instance. You can go and do your settings by create the launch, by click on the launch instance. It will launch a machine and you can do your settings as there as you do your settings on the personal server. First time deployment from the Visual Studio takes time, but the next time it will be very faster because first time it creates the profile, set up the machine and do the settings first time. So this is the URL. Once the application will be hosted on EC2, this URL will be accessible for global access. So anyone from the internet can access this URL. AWS application is deployed on the EC2 instance now, and its status is green. So when you refresh this, you can see all the status are green here. So let's click on this URL and see if the site is deployed or not. You can see here, welcome to shopping site is deployed and hosted by AWS EC2 environment. So going back, you can see one running instance is here. That means AWS has created a machine for us, that is one instance, and our application is being hosted by this instance. AWS will not charge you for the application hosted on AWS for all the time. The AWS charge is on the basis of your usage. So it depends on how much your site is being hit by the external user, and they charge accordingly. So that's the good thing about AWS, and that makes difference with other hosting environment. So let's recap whole exercise. We have learned AWS Lambda. AWS Lambda is just a logic, and you create a AWS Lambda function in your Visual Studio. In order to create the Visual Lambda function in your Visual Studio, you have to install AWS Toolkit in the Visual Studio extension, and then you can create AWS Lambda function. We have learned about API gateway. API gateway in the AWS console is the service to expose your APIs. And in the API gateway, you create the API and then resources, and then you associate your resources with your Lambda you just created in your Visual Studio. We also learned about the DynamoDB. DynamoDB is a database by the AWS services. It's a NoSQL database. We have created one table, block table in the DynamoDB. We also learned about the AWS Cloud Formation Stack. AWS Cloud Formation Stack is a complete application, is a package. When you create the stack, it will automatically create a basic skeleton application. We have just created AWS Cloud Formation Stack, and that is about the block table. We have successfully created some blocks and accessed in DynamoDB. AWS Cloud Formation Stack, when you host it, the APIs will be automatically exposed and you can use your APIs in your application. The next we'll learn about how to host our web application onto the AWS. We have created a basic web application, and then we have hosted our web application on EC2 AWS environment. It created an instance for us, and we can see that instance from the AWS console. I hope this video helped you to understand to jump into the basics of AWS concepts. If you like this video, please write your comments. If you want to give some suggestions, just provide your feedback and